I sat at the breakfast table, sipping my coffee, the morning sunlight filtering in through the kitchen window. Across from me, Brenda was quietly scanning the local newspaper, her eyes focused but distant as she absently stirred her tea. Karen, sitting to my right, scrolled through her phone, her face fixed in her usual look of disinterest. The occasional clinking of utensils and the rustling of the paper were the only sounds breaking the silence. 5 years of marriage, and our life had fallen into a rhythm that, while comforting, felt fragile. Brenda had been through so much before I met her. Her divorce from Marcus had been a nightmare. A chaotic, painful mess she'd had to claw her way out of after he was arrested for beating her during one of his drunken rages. The scars, both visible and unseen, were a part of her, and she rarely spoke of those days. But I could always sense the tension in her voice whenever his name came up. I came into her life a few months after that chapter closed. We met through mutual friends at a dinner party neither of us wanted to attend, but something clicked that night. Maybe it was the way her laughter lightened the room, or the way she really listened when I spoke. A year of dating later, we tied the knot. Karen, now 18, came as part of the package. I knew being a stepfather wouldn't be easy, especially with a daughter as guarded as Karen. She was polite, but there was always a wall between us that I couldn't seem to scale. I don't blame her. I'm not her father, and I never tried to be. I've done my best to find a place in their lives that feels right for all of us. I take care of them, love them, and have accepted that Karen may never see me as anything more than her mother's husband, and honestly, I'm fine with that. But for a few months now, Brenda has felt like a stranger in our home. The warmth we once shared has been replaced by a growing distance. The little things have piled up: reduced intimacy, fewer conversations, and her constant claim of being too tired for anything. Then there's the phone, always in her hand, her eyes glued to the screen. It's hastily put away whenever I enter the room. None of it has gone unnoticed. I'm not a fool. These are red flags, bright as day. At first, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was stress, maybe something I'd done or failed to do. But as the weeks turned into months, it became impossible to ignore the nagging voice in the back of my head. So, I did what I had to do. I hired a private investigator. $2,000 later, I had my answers. A good investigator doesn't come cheap, but knowing the truth is worth every cent. The truth was that she had been seeing Marcus, her ex-husband, the same man who had destroyed her once, the one I thought she had left behind for good. And now, today was the day I knew what Brenda had planned for me. Then, like clockwork, it started. Brenda folded the paper and placed it neatly on the table, her hands lingering on its edges, as though searching for courage in its creases. She looked at me, her lips pressed tightly together, before finally speaking. "Brian, I have something to tell you," she said, her voice unusually soft. I set my coffee mug down carefully, my eyes fixed on hers. "Oh yes, dear, please go ahead," I said, keeping my tone steady, almost inviting. She hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the corner of the tablecloth. "I'll be out for a month," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, as though the words themselves weighed her down. I remained calm, leaning forward slightly. "Okay," I replied, my voice steady. Her shoulders tensed, and she shrugged again, as though bracing herself. "I'll be out for a month. I'll be staying with Marcus," she said, her voice firmer now, as if the repetition had lent her some courage. "It's his birthday month, and I want to make it good for him." I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of her words settle in. My expression didn't change, but inside, a storm was brewing. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I forced myself to remain composed. Keeping my voice measured, I replied, my words thick with quiet intensity. "So what will you be doing there? Cleaning his house, cooking his food, and having sex with him? Can't he just hire a hooker for that and feel good? Why does my lawfully wedded wife have to be that hooker?" My tone was sharp as I sipped my coffee, determined not to let my emotions take control. Her eyes widened, and she shot back. "What the hell are you talking about? I am no hooker or maid. I'll be there like his wife, not like that." I set my coffee cup down, the motion deliberate and slow, trying to keep my voice steady. But you were married to me when you started doing whatever it is you plan to do with him. This isn't just being his wife. This is cheating on me, cheating on our marriage." She didn't flinch or hesitate. Instead, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "No, because I told you so. It's not cheating." I nodded slowly, the absurdity of her logic sinking in like a weight. "Okay, so what do you expect from me then? Should I just wait here for 30 days while my wife plays house with another man?" Her frustration boiled over, and her voice, tinged with exasperation, snapped. "Oh, come on, Brian. I have some desires that I need to fulfill, and only Marcus can do that for me." I shot back without missing a beat. "Like tying you to a bed and flogging you with a whip? Are those the desires you mean?" I knew exactly what she was talking about. I'd seen the texts, the videos, the images seared into my mind. Things I could never unsee. I kept my expression calm, but inside, my anger simmered just below the surface. I looked straight into her eyes and said, "So you have desires. What about mine? Do I get to take care of my desires?" Her frustration was palpable as she threw her hands up in the air. "Fine, do whatever you want. But once I'm back, you'll be a faithful husband again." I leaned forward, my tone cold and deliberate. "And what if my desires aren't satisfied in 30 days? What happens then? What if I find a better source of satisfaction? One that makes me not want to come back to you? Would that be fine with you?" Her face twisted with irritation, but before she could respond, I turned my gaze toward Karen, who had been silently watching the entire exchange. "What do you think, Karen?" I asked, my voice steady, sharp. "Should your mother risk her marriage for a month with her new lover?" Karen shot me a smirk of defiance. "She has her needs and desires. You don't own her. She's not your slave and is free to drink from any watering hole she wants." The arrogance in her tone hit me like a slap. It was clear Karen wasn't just supporting her mother. She was revving me up, telling me to go to hell. She wasn't neutral. She was involved. I could see it in her eyes, hear it in the way she spoke. Karen was as much a part of this as Brenda, and I knew the whole truth. Karen would be going to Marcus's house too. The thought twisted something deep inside me, but I kept my face composed. Raising both hands in a gesture of surrender, I said, "Since both of you want this to happen, I won't be a roadblock in the grand scheme of things." Brenda's lips curled into a smile, a smug, satisfied expression that stung more than her words ever could. But I wasn't finished. I continued in a calm, deliberate tone, "However, Brenda, I want you to sign a document stating that we will be separated for the next 30 days, officially and legally. I will not be responsible for you or your daughter, financially or in any other way, during that time. And I will be free to do as I please and take care of my desires." Brenda narrowed her eyes at me, her tone skeptical. "How does that work?" I leaned back in my chair, keeping my demeanor calm and composed. "I'll call my lawyer right now. He'll draft up the necessary documents, and we can go to the court tomorrow to make it official. Simple." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle, then added with a touch of sarcasm, "So you see, I'm just clearing the path for you. You can go and be with Tom, Dick, or Harry for the next 30 days, and it won't be cheating, since we'll be separated." A faint smirk tugged at the corner of my lips. "And I, in turn, can have my desires taken care of with nothing holding me back." Her eyes narrowed further, suspicion flickering across her face. I stood there for a moment, feeling a calm certainty flood over me, the anger that had simmered for so long now giving way to something colder, more methodical. Brenda's words had already shown me the path she had chosen, and I knew there was no point in trying to stop her now. I smiled, a small, calculated grin, and said, "Because, Brenda, your words have already made it clear you wouldn't have stopped, so there's no need for me to stop you." Karen, who had been quiet up until then, smiled smugly. "Mom, it's a good idea. I didn't know Brian could support you like this." I turned to face her, matching her arrogance with a calm smile. "Oh, you have no idea." Without another word, I walked out of the room, my phone already in hand. I dialed my lawyer, keeping it simple, "Do it." By the time the afternoon rolled around, my lawyer sat across from Brenda in our living room, papers spread neatly before her. Without so much as glancing at the documents, she picked up the pen and signed them with a flourish, her confidence radiating from every movement. I leaned back, watching her, my expression neutral. When she finished, I allowed the smallest of smiles to curl the corners of my lips. "It's done now," I said evenly. "It'll be finalized by tomorrow." That evening, I told Brenda I was heading out for a drink. No excuses, no explanations, just the quiet certainty of a man who knew exactly what was happening. I wasn't drunk when I returned hours later, but I made sure to come back late enough to avoid any interaction with her. The next morning, we found ourselves in the courtroom. Brenda stood beside me, her demeanor calm, unwavering in her confidence. The judge glanced over the document, his expression neutral. "Mrs. Brenda Wilson, did you have this document checked with your attorney?" he asked, looking up from the papers. "For the next 30 days, your husband will not be responsible for your or your daughter's financial support, and he is free to do whatever he likes. Are you okay with this?" Without hesitation, Brenda nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge shrugged and said, "Okay." That evening, Brenda busied herself packing her bags with a level of energy I hadn't seen in months. Her face practically glowed with happiness, a stark contrast to the tension that had been growing between us for so long. I stood by the door, arms crossed, watching her with a detached expression. She looked up at me, excitement spilling over. "Oh, thank you, Brian. You have no clue how happy I am. I'll make sure to make it up to you when I'm back." Her words were almost laughable, but I kept my composure. I smiled faintly and replied, "Oh, don't worry about that. I'll make sure I'm happy with that." I turned and walked out, my footsteps steady but my mind swirling with thoughts. Everything was set, every detail accounted for. It was time to execute the plan. I had always prided myself on being a man of logic, someone who kept emotions in check and focused on rational solutions. But standing there, watching her pack, I felt something unfamiliar, a sense of loss gnawing at the edges of my resolve. It wasn't just Brenda I had lost. It was something deeper, something harder to define. But then again, she had already wrecked our marriage long before this moment. All my efforts, helping her daughter, every bit of time, energy, and money I'd poured into making their lives easier, had amounted to nothing. The new car I bought for her daughter, the hefty college fund I worked overtime to build, it all amounted to nothing. And for what? For her daughter to smugly tell me that I didn't own her mother. Well, it sucks. But when has life ever promised to be easy? Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. That fundamental truth of the universe still holds, and now, I intended to prove it with my own reaction. That evening, Brenda left with her daughter to be with her ex-husband, Marcus. I made sure to wave them goodbye one last time. They deserved to see that goodbye. Once they were out of sight, I walked to the kitchen, grabbed the bottle of Jack Daniels from the cabinet, and poured myself a large one. I added a few cubes of ice and took a small sip, letting the warmth of the alcohol slide down my throat. It was the only thing that felt familiar at this moment. Then, I picked up the phone and made the call. "It's done," I said, my voice steady. "Let's start the show." The next morning, I woke up with a clear plan. The first thing to go was the car I had bought for my wife's daughter. It was a Honda, one she had loved when she first saw it, even if she grumbled about the color. Well, tough luck. She could now pick whatever color she wanted for her next car. Hopefully, Marcus could buy it for her. Next, I turned my attention to my wife's car, the one she adored. She always flaunted it, acting like it was the best thing I could have ever done for her. Well, too bad. She never once appreciated the man who worked tirelessly to give her what she wanted. Now, for the next 30 days, Marcus could handle her transportation. I wouldn't be the one to provide that comfort anymore. As for the house, it was too big. They had always complained about how they wanted something smaller, cozier, like Marcus's house. Well, now they had one, so might as well make that permanent. It's not like they'd be coming back to this one anytime soon. By the end of the day, I had what I needed, $2 million in my offshore account. No more sacrifices. Now, I could finally do what I wanted, without anything or anyone holding me back. 3 days passed, and the silence was almost peaceful. But then the phone rang again. It was Brenda. Her voice was shaky, like she was trying to keep her composure, but panic was still evident. I called the house, but no one answered. "Where are you?" I couldn't help but smile, the irony not lost on me. I picked up my drink, took a slow sip, and without missing a beat, I replied, taking care of my desires. With that, I ended the call, cutting her off before she could respond. That evening, my phone buzzed nonstop. First it was Brenda, then Karen, both calling repeatedly. It was clear they were furious and likely frantic. I had a good guess why. They must have gotten the notifications from the bank by now. The joint account was empty, the college fund gone. I could almost hear the shock in their voices, and I understood why. They had no idea what had hit them. But honestly, how could I take care of my desires when all my money was tied up in those accounts? Still, I didn't pick up immediately. The calls kept coming, but I didn't respond. Let them stew for a while. Let them process the mess I'd left behind. It took another 3 days, 3 long days of constant ringing, before I finally decided to answer the phone. "Hey Brenda, how are you?" I said, my voice calm, almost casual. "Sorry, I was busy getting my desires catered to, so I couldn't answer your calls." She didn't hold back. The insults, the accusations, the guilt trips. All of it came pouring out in a relentless stream. Every verbal garbage you could imagine. And even some things that left me scratching my head in disbelief. But honestly, she had every right to be angry. I wasn't expecting sympathy. I just sat there listening, waiting for her to finish. And once she finally fell silent, I knew it was time. "I guess it's not the time to talk," I said, cutting her off before she could get another word in. I hung up. That went on for 5 days. 5 straight days of her screaming and me hanging up each call, more frantic than the last. It was almost predictable at this point. But on the 6th day, when I picked up, there was a noticeable shift. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't spewing her anger at me. Instead, there was a calmness in her voice. "Why did you take away all the money?" she asked. I leaned back, taking my time with the answer. "Well, living in a 5-star hotel in Jamaica costs a lot. How do I pay for it unless I empty your daughter's college fund that I paid for?" "What?" she screamed. "That was my dream vacation. How could you do this to me?" "Well, my desire was for you to remain faithful to me. That didn't work out well, so I got the next best thing. A vacation in Jamaica with a young blonde Russian woman to keep me company." Brenda's voice cracked with fury as she screamed, "You will not get away with this. Once I'm back, I'll make you pay." I could feel her rage through the phone, like it was burning right through the line. Honestly, it didn't faze me. I'd expected it. She was always like this, overreacting to things, the same old drama. But it wasn't the kind of emotion I wanted to deal with right now. I wasn't in the mood for a fight. Not with her, not with anyone. I took a deep breath, my fingers tightening around the phone. "I guess you're angry," I said, my voice calm, almost too calm. "Not the kind of emotion I want to deal with right now." Before she could say anything more, I pressed the end call button. There was no need for any more of her threats. Not today. A month had nearly passed, and now it was time to move on to the next phase of my plan. I boarded the plane, and I had a clear destination in mind. It wasn't just another getaway. No, this was something bigger. Thailand? Back when I was working as a software analyst, I had frequently been offered a partnership at a firm in Bangkok. At the time, I brushed it off, not feeling the need for anything more. But now, with nothing really tying me down back home, nothing left that mattered, I figured, why not? So I'd accepted their offer, and here I was on my way. The plane ride was long, but it gave me time to think, to reflect on everything that had led me here. When the wheels finally touched down, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. I had made my choice. I had moved on. I landed in Bangkok, switched on my phone, and immediately called my lawyer. "She'll be back today. Please give her my gift." It was time for everything to unfold. Later that evening, Brenda and Karen returned home, or what they used to call home. I couldn't help but imagine the look on their faces when they saw what awaited them at the door. A man was already standing there, waiting. He approached them with calm professionalism. "Hello, are you Mrs. Brenda Wilson?" he asked. She nodded, her face a mixture of confusion and dread. "You've been served," the man said, handing her a manila envelope. He stood back a few feet and snapped a picture before walking away without another word. The image, captured in that brief flash, was still the best thing I'd seen in a while. There she was, Brenda, holding that envelope, her face crumpling as tears started to fall. Karen stood beside her, looking utterly shocked, her eyes scanning the driveway. "Dude, where's my car?" she asked, her voice quivering. As I predicted, the phone call started. I let them ring through, waiting until I was in the comfort of my hotel room before I dialed her number. I didn't even need to say anything. She picked up almost immediately. Before I could say a word, she exploded. "You are not an honorable man. You're jealous of Marcus. You couldn't handle your ego." Her voice was shrill, a steady stream of insults, same ones every cheating wife throws when caught. I didn't interrupt her. I didn't even flinch. I just listened. This time, I wasn't hanging up. I wasn't running from it. I waited for my turn. "Did you open the envelope?" I asked, my voice steady. There was a brief silence on the other end, followed by the sound of rustling paper. Inside were the images of her and Marcus having sex, complete with timestamps and locations, even the ones where she was tied to the bed. You knew all this time," she said, her voice faltering for the first time. "Oh yes," I said calmly. "I did." I could almost hear her processing it, the weight of the truth sinking in. "Since you made your bed," I continued, "I made sure you'd sleep in it." "You did not try to stop me," she said. "Oh no. Why should I stop you?" I replied. "Once you decided to cheat, you ended our marriage. Besides, why would I choose between a cheating wife and a vacation in Jamaica?" The next part was almost too easy. "The divorce has been filed under adultery, and I've left some money in the joint account. Hopefully, that will be enough for you to reach Marcus's house." I could feel the tension on the other end, the raw anger, but I didn't care. The ball was no longer in her court. Her voice screeched through the phone, raw and desperate. "You didn't leave any money for your daughter. How will she go to college?" I didn't hesitate. "She will not," I shot back. "Not on my money. She's not my daughter. Her actions have proved that time and again. She can go to college on her father's money." There was a long pause before I heard the phone being snatched away. Karen's voice came through next, and once again, I was bombarded with the same barrage of screams and insults. I knew what this was. I knew it would be the last conversation, the last time I'd hear from either of them, so I endured it. Then, in a voice that wavered between rage and disbelief, Karen said, "You sold my car." "No, I sold my car," I shot back, not even flinching. "You took away my college fund," she cried, the desperation clear in her voice. I couldn't hold back the bitterness anymore. "No," I replied coldly. "I made sure I had money to fund my desire for a Jamaican vacation. Besides, it was my money, and I took it back." And then, without missing a beat, I added, "As you said, your mother can drink from any watering hole, so can I." She screamed again, her voice shaking with anger and frustration. "What will I tell my friends? My car is gone." I didn't flinch. "Tell them your loser stepfather sold it to fund his Jamaican vacation, and now I'm going back to live with my biological father." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end before Brenda snatched the phone back. Her voice was dripping with accusation. "You stole our money. I'll call the cops." "Please," I said with a cold laugh. "Go ahead," I said, my tone completely calm. "You signed that legal document that waived my financial responsibility toward you. I spent the money within the 30 days, and now I'm broke. I have no money." She shot back immediately, her disbelief heavy in her words. "You want me to believe that?" I smiled. "I never asked you to believe me, but in court, I will prove it." I ended the call with a calm final note. "For any further communication, please call my lawyer. His number is in the envelope. Have a good day, Brenda." A few days later, I knew Brenda would try to fight the divorce, but I was confident in my lawyer's ability to handle it. Brenda claimed that I knew about her staying with her ex-husband and approved it. My lawyer then presented the images with timestamps and locations, which were from before the agreed 30-day period. My client had no knowledge of the infidelity before the 30-day period, my lawyer said. She lied to her husband and broke his trust. She violated the terms of the agreement. He quickly proved that I had spent every last cent of my money on vacations in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. Receipts, invoices, everything. It was all legitimate. Besides, Mrs. Wilson had signed off on her financial responsibilities during the 30 days she was with her ex-husband. The judge, though, wasn't naive. He could see the situation for what it was: manipulation and deceit. But there was little he could do. The paperwork had been meticulously filed, and the legal process had been followed. His hands were tied. Even though he could see through the charade, he ordered that whatever assets remained be properly settled. That's when Brenda's lawyer, clearly desperate, tried to bring up child support. But my lawyer wasn't about to let that slide. With a firm tone, he immediately objected, pointing out the obvious truth. Karen wasn't my daughter. Not biologically, not legally. I had never adopted her. The judge knew this was a crucial detail that rendered child support irrelevant. My lawyer didn't stop there, though. He made a bold move, one that only added to the absurdity of the entire situation. He argued that I had given up all worldly responsibilities, having chosen the path of a Buddhist monk. No income, no possessions, no obligations. It was an audacious defense, but it worked. The judge, who had been sitting stone-faced through most of the proceedings, couldn't help but almost laugh at the ridiculousness of it all. He glanced at Brenda, his smirk betraying his amusement. "Tough luck, lady," he said, barely holding back his laughter. "Can't help you further. The divorce is granted, and the joint account money is to be given to Brenda." A month after the divorce, I learned that Brenda and Karen had moved in with Marcus. However, the reality was far from the picture they probably envisioned. It wasn't the happy family they'd hoped for. In fact, it was a repeat of the toxic, abusive cycle Brenda had long tried to escape. Marcus, in his drunken state, continued to beat Brenda like he had before during their marriage. But I guess Brenda liked it rough. And Karen? She was nothing more than a silent witness, powerless in the face of it all. Brenda couldn't leave him. She had no place to go, no support system left. She was stuck, trapped in the very nightmare I had once been part of. Karen now walks to school or takes the bus. No more luxuries, no more easy rides. The comfort they had enjoyed was gone. As for Marcus, my revenge on him was never meant to be violent. It was simple. I handed him exactly what he wanted. Now, he had to feed and take care of his new family, his wife for 30 days and her daughter. Let him deal with the consequences of his actions. Let him face the reality of the mess he had created. I'd given him exactly what he desired, but it came with a price. Sometimes, you need to be careful of what you want. You might just get it. Was the protagonist's extreme retaliation truly justified, or did he let his emotions cloud his judgment? Throughout the story, he took drastic measures to avenge his betrayal, but at what cost? Does his calculated revenge on Brenda and Marcus reflect a deep sense of justice, or was it an unhealthy way of coping with betrayal? Could he have taken a more constructive route in dealing with the situation, or was his response inevitable given the circumstances? How do you think the impact of his actions will ripple through the lives of everyone involved?